Kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai, and welcome to Council meeting on Monday, the 18th of December 2023, a countdown to the end of the year. And I would now like to ask the Deputy Mayor to open our proceedings with karakia.
Tēnā koe, Mr Mayor, o tira tēnā tātou i ngā rangatira, koutou katoa. Kia hora te marino, may peace be widespread. Kia whakapapa pounamu te moana, may the sea be like greenstone. Hei huarahi, mā tātou i te rangi nei. A pathway for us all this day. Aroha atu, aroha mai. Give love, receive love. Tātou i a tātou katoa. Let us show respect for each other. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, thank you. Right, in terms of housekeeping, the meeting is being recorded, it's being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. We'll have some health and safety on the screen and to welcome to members of the public. In the unlikely event of an emergency, we will exit immediately via the running person green signs, and we assemble in the clock tower area in Te Marae the square downstairs. Smoking is prohibited in the building, and unlike the event of needing a defibrillator, that's located in the foyer entrance downstairs. And any incidences or near misses, please report those to our committee administration. To the officers, please, for those online, if we could perhaps just in the first instance mention your name and title, that would be fantastic. Just before I get into our order of business, just acknowledge the passing of a couple of people in recent times. Paul Dibble, of course, who was a great sculptor and a resident of the city for many years, and Peter Bush, who we have his collection in Te Manawa, and he passed away at the weekend. So sad to see both of those artists go. And also today, on a lighter note, to the day this chamber opened 44 years ago. So that's a little bit of interesting sort of knowledge for you, exactly to the day. And there is a photo down the hallway there with the grand piano in here as they open proceedings for the council meeting of that era. We're not going to do that today, but yeah. All right. We'll get into our order of business, and it's a big day today. Councillors, we will move a few things around today. We'll bring forward the rates discussion because there may be a number of councillors, if we left it into the normal order of, we may miss a few people, so with apologies coming and going. But we've got a full house today, well certainly this morning. I think in terms of Councillor Hapeta of early departure later this afternoon for today. Right, so I've got apologies there for today. I'm just talking about today. That Council receive apologies from Councillor Hapeta for early departure. I'll look to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Councillor Wood, you want to comment?
Mr Mayor, just to clarify, is tomorrow's meeting part of today's meeting, and if we're not going to be here tomorrow, should we move
They will be taken as separate, set for attendance only, separately.
All right, thank you.
You need, Councillor?
Will you be taking the apologies for tomorrow, Thursday and Wednesday today, or?
No, on those days.
All right.
And please email them to Hannah if you have them. Thank you. Okay. All right, we've got that out of the way. I'll ask you to vote, please. That has passed 15 votes for, and we'll take it. I'm presuming it was a yes, Councillor. Right, that's unanimous, thank you. Okay, we move through to notification of additional items, and we do have some that are adjourned from our meeting of the 13th. And one was around 5, the indicated framework for the long-term plan 24-34, number 5, and number 7 was the LTP capital new programs for strategic, just the outstanding recommendations there. The reason for the lateness is not available at the time of publishing the agenda, and reason for urgency to inform budget development in time for the new year. I'll look to move those, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Are there any commentary to that? There being none, we will vote, please. And that's passed 16 votes for unanimously. Thank you. Okay, declarations of interest, number 4. I haven't received any. Nothing from the floor. Councillor Finlay. Can you just, sorry, Councillor, could you just push your button and we'll get you onto the queue there.
With the notice of motion, my daughter lives in that area. I have no pecuniary interest, but I'd like to let it know. I will enter the debate.
Thank you. If you could just push your microphone, Councillor. Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, if I could declare an interest in 19 with the re-engagement in that process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, they are noted, thank you. I don't have any public comment. And we'll go through to number 6, which is on page 9 of your papers, which is around confirmation of minutes from the 29th, Part 1 public, and the 6th of December, Part 1 public. Are there any matters arising? Councillor Johnson.
A couple of things, please, Mr. Mayor. First minutes can be taken separately, and the second one, which I've already emailed the administrators about, is on the 6th of December. It just needs to be recorded that was an apology on council business. Thank you.
Noted. Understood. Okay. I'll look to move those, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to note on page 17, there is an error at 1B. We changed the wording there to say council will produce a long-term plan that lives within the proposed debt limit. This wording says the council will aim to produce. I believe that we changed that at that meeting.
Yeah, I can recall that conversation. Noted. It will get done. 29th of November. Okay. Good. All right. As amended, has been added there. I'll ask you to, no more matters arising. I'll ask you to vote, please. And we take them, sorry, we're going to take them separately. So we've got the 29th first. And that has passed 15 votes for and 1 abstention. Okay, we'll go to the second confirmation of minutes. And this is around that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the 6th of December 2023, Part 1, be confirmed as a true and correct record, as amended. All right, we will vote, please. That has passed 15 votes for and 1 abstention. Okay, we have next on the item is number 22. We're going to take presentation of committee recommendations. This has been deferred from the 6th of December 2023. It's on page, this is for our Culture and Sport Committee of the 8th of November 2023. I'll ask the Chair, Councillor Bowen, to speak to those. Page 299 of your papers. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move that the recommendations from Culture and Sport, 8th of November 2023, be adopted, please.
That's seconded by the Deputy Chair, Councillor Meehan. Okay. There. All right. Are there any matters for that? None? We will vote. And that has passed 14 votes for, 1 against and 1 abstention. Right. We will now go to number 23, which is page 301 of your papers. And this is from Strategic and Finance from the 15th of November. And I'll ask Councillor Dennison, the Chair, to speak to that, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This also pertains to a notice of motion that I'm putting forward. So just to be clear, I want to move this in 3 parts. The first, I want to move to adopt 6823, which is the Panaco Park, 7023, which is the Housing and Business Needs Capability Assessment, and 7223 Procurement Policy, which is straightforward. Then included on 8023, which is the Pioneer Reserve with Powerco, I want to move it in these terms, which are noted in the paper, I believe, or at least on the screen, which needed to include the actual address, the lot number, because in the report that came to council, it just said Pioneer Highway, which gave no description. So the wording would be that council granted an easement to convey electricity to Powerco, noting that the land area affected is Pioneer Reserve, described as Lot 2, DP 88159. So some technicalities there, but it's important to approve that that item. But then for the Waterloo Park Land Exchange, I would want to refer to the notice of motion on page 31 and 32 and 33 of the order paper, which is item 8, and move it in the terms that are outlined in that council note, but set aside the objections, including the petition, to exchange of part of Waterloo Park for the following reasons. A, that the matter of privacy, traffic, flooding and contamination will be dealt with through the plan change process. B, the green space provision in the area is significant. C, there is alternate space for the establishment of a community orchard in Waterloo Park. D, there is no loss of green space as the area of reserve received in exchange will be equal to the size to the exchange reserve, and car parking will not be established on the land received in the exchange. And E, the land received in exchange would have a wider community benefit than retaining the existing strip of Waterloo Park, and I'll outline the reasons in debate. And 2, 3 and 4, that council approve the application to the Minister of Conservation to exchange 1,300 square metres of Waterloo Park being part of Part Lot 44, DP 22620, held in title WN, and the total listed, for new reserve land in Roxburgh Crescent area. The title was WN 8C884. 3, that council note that the exchange would only be given in effect if the minister approves is received and the rezoning of Roxburgh Crescent area is approved. And 4, that council note that regardless of the decision on the exchange, a budget for additional car parking and path connections to the new river entrance to the existing Manawatu shared path has been forwarded to the draft 24-34 10-year plan. Sorry for the mouthful. But in regards to the notice of motion, can I reserve my right to speak on that specifically until the officers' report? Is that the intention, Mr. Mayor, that the officers will present their attached report? Can I just clarify that situation?
No, it'll be just the officers' report's already been received, so it'll just be a straight-out debate on your notice of motion.
Thank you. Well, therefore, I'll speak to the notice of motion, and that is also seconded by yourself, Mr. Mayor.
Cool. We'll take the other ones first, councillor, just so we get some
clarity.
Some clarity, yeah.
Okay. Well, I understand that Councillor Naylor will second actually those other items, but Mr. Mayor, your name is written in the seconder.
Okay. So what we're going to do.
I'll reserve my right to speak until after the vote on those other items.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what we're going to do, councillors, is we'll take 68, clauses 68, 70, 72-2 and 80-2. 23, sorry, and they're together. Okay, so that's moved by the Chair, Councillor Dennison, seconded by the Deputy Chair, Councillor Naylor. Are there any matters arising from those? There are none. We will vote on those, please, first. And that has passed 15 votes for and 1 abstention. Okay, so we now come back to the notice of motion, councillor. So back to you on that, and over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, members, and thank you, the community, for the interest in this item. Can I start by saying that is true? I communicate with the petitioners directly in response to the outcome of the committee meeting. And I'd say well done for championing this issue. You've inspired a community response that has been sincere, incredibly creative and compelling, enough to get enough votes through, obviously, at that point, and best wishes for future engagement of the land. So accepting of an outcome that I was quite disappointed in myself. And it's funny how processes work out. And I've been on the receiving end of many decisions over the years that have disappointed me too. But in our political decision-making processes, we do have a cool-off period. And this is one of them, where people have posed with an open mind and reconsidered this issue. And through the simple fact of having enough to bring this back to the table in this form, as outcomes ultimately are decided by majority decisions. And it's quite right that members have the chance to be open-minded and reconsider issues before they are finalised at council. And with over or close to 100,000 residents in the city, and with infrastructure that's worth in excess of 1.7 billion, and with expenditure of in the vicinity of 70 to 80 million in any one year it's impossible to please everybody. And that is one of the fundamental truths that I come to appreciate early on in my serving here in the city. And so I want to thank those members that did reconsider and that have supported this notice of motion. I do, again, want to acknowledge the petitioners and those that submitted to this process. I do believe it was very creative and thought-prompting around the possibilities. But ultimately, I still come down to those decisions that have been unchanged for me. They are around the points outlined, that those aspects that they desire can be achieved even with this reserved land exchange. There's been goodwill with the developer that's noted good faith that we've progressed, and so that is also a consideration. I come to appreciate even after the decision at committee, there was still going to be a significant cost for land being acquired to achieve desirable outcomes, in my view, that would be suitable for the longer term. And I don't believe they were fully appreciated. And that outcome would leave the benefit of that strip being mostly landlocked, apart from a narrow entranceway, with the enjoyment with very few, considering we're making decisions here for the tens of thousands of residents in our city for a better outcome. It's true the river has been becoming a really feature of our city, the linear park, and the enjoyment to walk the paths and cycle. And so, therefore, I think a prominent entranceway is more befitting for our city. And so, for those reasons and those that I shared at the committee, I'd like to move for other speakers to debate. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got two questions, first of all, before I speak. Is that okay? The first one is, and given that I wasn't at the December 6th council meeting, I understand that the committee recommendations were on the agenda for that meeting, but the notice of motion was not. Is that correct?
Yes.
So can I just ask a sort of process question then? At what stage was the notice of motion presented? Because there was no date on it.
10 days prior
10 days prior to what?
to this agenda.
To this agenda. So had the committee recommendations been presented on the 6th then, the notice of motion wouldn't have been presented at that point.
Yep, that's correct.
So what was the reason for the delay on the 6th of December?
We had about 30 items and we didn't even get close to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I've just got a question about the landowner. So Councillor Dennison's notice of motion here in D says there is an indication that the major landowner may now oppose both pedestrian and cycle links, etc., etc. So I just want to explore the nature of that indication and how it's just a little nebulous there. So I just want to understand, have we had a written indication? What's the indication that we've received? And what standing does it have?
I wouldn't be able to answer that, but officers might be able to.
Well, possibly Councillor Dennison, since he's aware of it.
In response to the question, it was only ever verbal to me. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want me to make my comments now? Yeah. I won't be supporting this change in direction. I'm a little uncomfortable, to be honest, about what it says about our consultation processes as a council. It may just be my read of it, but it seems to me that when consultation didn't produce the right outcome, that pressure was put on perhaps council members or staff members that the decision be reconsidered. And I think it's really important that if we go out in good faith ourselves with the community to ask them where they stand on a proposed course of action, and we hear their answer, and we make a decision in accordance with the submissions that we've received, I think it's really important that we don't subsequently overturn that decision because it seems that there was some prior agreement with a third party. And it really does call into question, lots of members of the public have called into question the integrity of the consultation process. And yes, I supported the original committee proposal around retaining the reserve and not doing the land exchange. But irrespective of that, at this moment, I certainly don't feel able to support this notice of motion because I think it really is a bad look, councillors. What does it say about our process, about who we listen to, about who's important in this city? That's what it says to me. I know that some people were opposed to this decision the first time round for their own good reason, and I can respect that. I've talked to some of you. But at this point in time, I just ask you to think carefully about what message you're sending to the members of the public in this city when a decision that we made based on a petition and submissions can be overturned because of a verbal conversation with a landowner with one council member. So I'll just leave you to reflect on that. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
May I ask a question first, Mr Mayor?
Yes.
Just regarding point A on page 32 of the notice of motion, Councillor, you've written that in good faith on the assumption that this proposed rezoning was done in good faith on the assumption that council's preferred option was to proceed with the land exchange. I just want to understand why they had that assumption. Was that something they had on their own volition, or did we make that clear? Just where's that coming from?
That there was, I believe, a known point in the fact that there was desires to move forward on this with discussions to officers right up until that decision, and I believe even feedback since from that decision. So the feedback is that there's some disappointment on their side of the fence, and there's obviously some negotiating pool that they will now have for any access in that desired outcome. So, I think that is a point, and that's why it's been included. You can take that point to weigh as much as you like on your decision making, but I thought it was important to add.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll make comment then. I want to start by saying, look, every councillor has a right to bring a notice of motion to a committee after a decision like this has been made. So I respect the fact that this is here. It's fully within Councillor Nielsen's right to do so. We did a similar thing earlier in the year with gold card parking. So I've got no issue with this being on the table today. What I take issue with are the reasons that are given. And I agree with Councillor Johnson to say that in good faith, the major landowner just assumed we were going to do it and then was caught out when the community actually cared about the reserve, I think is a frankly appalling reason to have written in our council order papers for our community to look at this and see, oh, well, we'd actually pretty much told them we were going to do it anyway, and that's what they've been planning on. And goodness, the community's come back and said, well, actually, they don't want us to do it, and we've been caught out. I think that is frightening to have written in a council agenda. I want to start, the process of the swap, of course, was a reasonable starting point. And I think any councillor here would say, yes, we've got a spare strip of land that doesn't seem to have a lot of usage, doesn't seem to be very well maintained. If we could swap that to provide a greater amenity value and the community didn't have an issue with it, then we'd do it. And I don't think any councillor would be voting against doing that if the community didn't care. I don't think any councillor sees that as a bad starting point. But what we've seen through the consultation period is 95, 98% of the feedback we've had is that we shouldn't do this and that the community does want that land, and often, as in cases, you don't realise what you have until it's almost lost. The community's come out and they've set up gardens, they've set up community events and set up usage of that space. And so for us to say, oh, well, it's not a very well used and not a very nice looking space, well, we're the ones who control it. We're the ones who maintain it. If it's got weeds in it, that is our responsibility and that's our fault, not the community's. And so I commend those in the community who are there who have put the effort in once the threat of this reserve was being removed, and have come and fought it very strongly. To Councillor Dennison's point that it's impossible to please everyone, yes, and in this case it is impossible to please the major landowner with the interests of the community at heart. How many prominent river entranceways do we need? There's one that we've just done on Albert Street, which is a 2-minute drive away that the community can use. If you're getting in your car from any point in the city, coming to this entrance or the one that is 2 minutes around the corner is much for muchness, really, in terms of the greater benefit to the wider community. There's still going to be a river entranceway here. There'll still be good access to it for the community that live there. But frankly, if you lived on Roxburgh Crest and had to drive 2 minutes, or lived on this new development, had to drive 2 minutes around the corner to enter the river through Albert Street, it's not a material difference in the scheme of actually being able to utilise the river on behalf of the community. But I want to talk to this point. I fully support a development here. I think a medium density development leading the way in the city is a great idea. And I hope that the major landowners will still undertake that development in reflection of the feedback that we've had from the community. You've got to have a pretty significant reason to overturn that much public pushback. And the reason given, which is, oh, well, we'd sort of already told them we were going to do it, is just not good enough. I'm sorry, councillors. What does that say about the consultation process that have we gone out and consulted in good faith with the community? Well, it would appear not. I'm sorry, that's what it appears like. It would appear that we've gone out assuming that the community's not going to care, and that when the community has cared, we're now choosing to ignore it. So I can't support this notice of motion. I can't support overturning a decision that was made. I understand the cost, and look, as you councillors well know from last week, I'm all for not spending money where money doesn't need to be spent, and I put forward many proposals on how we do that. But this is one of those cases where, for a limited cost, given the community interest in this space, I'm prepared to accept it. When you have hundreds of people signing a petition over what has quite rightly been called a reasonably small, piece of land on the edge of a community, well, that shows me that people have gone out of their way to engage. They've gone out of their way to be interested in the space and to use this space. And so I would say to councillors who might have signed this notice of motion, you don't have to vote for it. To the Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Finlay, Councillor Arnott and others, you don't have to vote for this. You can still go ahead with the original decision informed by the community feedback and the community will that we've had. But please do not accept the fact that we made a mistake, it would appear as council, in indicating to the landowner that we would do this, as reason to not support it. At the end of the day, we should be ashamed if that is the process we have undertaken. We should be ashamed if we have told that landowner that this reserve swap will be going ahead and plan for it, for them to have this much community feedback that we shouldn't. That is not a reason to ignore the community. That is a reason for us to have a long and hard look at ourselves at how we consult with the community.
Councillor Naylor.
I have a question first of governance, Mr Mayor, and then I'll have a comment. On page 33, it's the last paragraph there talks about the fact that having these signatures meets the threshold for reconsideration under Standing Order 2.25, which is about repeat notices of motion. I'm just wondering, given that this was a committee recommendation that hadn't been confirmed at council, was that required, or is that over and above what is actually required under Standing Orders?
I'll just get the officer to explain.
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Mr Mayor. It's a really good question because this is quite technical, and Sarah and I had quite a discussion on this one. The wording in the standing order says that if a council decision or a committee decision, in this case it's a committee recommendation up to council, if a decision is voted against, then in order to reconsider what was voted against, then you need 1/3 of the signatures of council. So the difference here is if council had if the committee had put up a recommendation and then the chair had chosen to amend that or to put a different recommendation, they could absolutely do that. It's entirely within their right to do that. The difference here is that the recommendation that Councillor Dennison is putting up is the same recommendation that failed at committee. and therefore the extra standing order is required and is met through this process.
So the recommendation that was failed at committee, was that not to recommend that council confirm those resolutions? The committee doesn't have delegation to have made that decision, does it?
The committee does not have delegation to have made the decision, but the exact wording of what is being was put to committee is being put here. So the standing order requires that this be met because it's more than, it's very similar to what failed at committee. So the standing order specifically says even if it's at committee and not just at council.
Okay, and is that a change from what we've had in the past with the updated standing orders?
I don't think so.
Okay, I'll make comment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is quite, this is actually a different process with what I'm familiar with, that we've always operated on the basis that decisions that are made at committee aren't actual decisions till they're confirmed by council. And I'm interested to hear the comments, and certainly that's something I think I'm interested in understanding further, because that would be quite a change to what many of us have well understood around this table. My understanding was that a decision at committee isn't an actual council decision till it's confirmed at council. So this notice of motion, whilst I supported and signed it, I was a bit confused at the time as to whether it was actually necessary, given that the committee had given some indication, but this is the first time this decision is being decided on or discussed at council. And from my perspective, that is the place we make final decisions. I don't really want to add a lot from what I already said at committee, and I think Councillor Dennison has outlined it really well, other than to just say that consulting in good faith with the community doesn't always equate to deciding in favour for what they would like. I absolutely have heard the views and the perspectives of those who have who've made submissions and who are here today, and those are valid views. However, as councillors, we do have to take a wider look at the benefit to all ratepayers in all of our city when we make decisions. And so I'm still in the same mind as my views at committee to support the officer's recommendation, which is what is outlined in this notice of motion.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and colleagues. This attempt for a 11th hour reversal with a notice of motion coming from an unnamed developer has got to be one of the worst examples of local government decision making on record. I'd have to say I'm deeply disappointed by this. And to what end? So that we can lose a second access point? I mean, why are we trading away access points? Surely what we should be doing is providing as much opportunity for the river and the community to be connected. And so I find it really concerning when we've had a good outcome that's been decided here at committee and thoroughly debated, that we're now under quite dubious process trying to trade that away on the basis of some developer pressure. I think it would be absolutely turning a deaf ear and blind eye to the community interest. We've heard loud and clear from the community their preference here. There is very much a win-win, a both and, which is what we have voted for. And I find it disturbing in the extreme to see the traces of developer influence that have arisen through, in writing, this notice of motion, showing how expectations were set up well in advance, showing how, before it came to council, before it went to community, how influence was being wielded then, and clearly how it's being wielded now with this notice of motion coming to us at the 11th hour. This is very much flying in the face of the wider community's arguments, which were very well reasoned, presented, and compelling through the submissions process. I find it best that we do uphold the decision of committee, so I won't be supporting this notice of motion. I find it deeply disappointing, and I expect the community will as well.
Councillors, I'll just comment. Along the same lines as Councillor Naylor, the committee didn't have the delegation. It's actually council has the full delegation. And I can recall another debate we had around a bowls or sporting community facility, which was overturned in the same way. And that community or those sports community needs were overturned. So I do think that that precedent has certainly been set here in this chamber. But look, I will back the officer's advice on this and urge you to as well. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yeah, look, I find that this whole debate quite, I suppose, stressing. And before I speak, I really do want to acknowledge Rosemary and her supporters in terms of bringing their views to council. If you recall, I think when we originally debated this, it was in two parts. The first was really to either we supported or did not support the land swap. I actually, at that time, voted to support the land swap, and then when that was lost, we had the amendments brought before us, and I voted for that because I saw it as the only opportunity available really to provide access to the river. So the only thing which really, I guess, overrides, my support for the community in this case is that we also have a duty for coherent planning. And when we have new developments like Roxburgh Crescent, we actually need to make sure that when we do plan that, we plan it in a way which provides the greatest benefit to the widest part or the greater part of the community. A lot of the matters which were raised by Rosemary and other people who made submissions are matters which will be properly dealt with through the plan change process. And I would be really disappointed if Rosemary and her friends did not make submissions to that plan change process in due course. The second option, which we actually did pass, 10 votes to 2, actually was not an optimum outcome for the community. So for all of those reasons, I will be supporting the motion. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Isabella.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, in my career, I had the really good fortune to be trained by the late Judge Dave Emler, RIP Matua, for a number of years in the setting of and upholding of judicial and Commission of Inquiry processes. And at the time, I could not believe that anyone could be so fastidious about rigorous process, and now I totally get it. I was really proud of us for voting to care for and develop an existing reserve that's neglected, because I'm all for looking after what we've got. But I did object to this land swap last time on the grounds that our process had been so patchy that it opened us up to a reputational risk of running effectively a show trial with the full intent of ploughing ahead to have it the way we designed it, even though the public disagreed. And I also objected because I did not have confidence in the evidence that was in front of me. Councillors, you have no new evidence in front of you now with this notice of motion. What you have in front of you are vague bullet points repeating something that was said to someone that we had to draw out under questioning that has at no point been submitted to our official decision-making process for fair consideration by all of the decision makers. That's not even from the horse's mouth. We are applying different rules to different parties in our process. That is a flagrant breach of Section 82 of the Local Government Act, but also of the principles of natural justice and the right to a fair hearing, which requires that all parties have equal access to the relevant material and information. And as a decision maker, I certainly expect to have all of that information. Maybe the 9 of you who signed this notice of motion are privy to more information than I am, and that's why you've signed it. But that only just goes to reinforce my point that we will vote on this notice of motion on no evidence on varying degrees of information and frankly gossip based on who's talked to who, and none of it is on the record. That's not only a disgrace, but it's just dodgy as hell. This notice of motion, we have new unsubstantiated claims which have not been aired in our processes, that the landowner proceeded on assurances of good faith that it would work out the way they wanted, despite that being in no way guaranteed. Where have those assurances come from? Surely we cannot have been encouraging a predetermined outcome from a matter that is subject to public consultation and a formal hearing process. There's never a commitment that we could make, and if we did make it, show hearing. It also tells us that this conversation has happened outside of the formal decision-making process. It shows a party who is participating only by private communications with one or a few of the people around this table behind closed doors. Different rules for different parties. Fair process? This to the effect that we now have a motion in front of us that asks us to disregard months of our own procedure, reverse the recommendation that's been based on transparent evidence, submissions, debate and deliberations, and to do that on the basis of 4 unsubstantiated bullet points. So I am objecting to this motion because there is no action that we could take now which would more truly show our hearing and consultation processes to be completely bogus than this does. Why would Rosemary and her friends engage in a plan change process when we have showed that our processes are so flimsy that months of work to do it properly can be undone in the course of a morning by the way of 4 bullet points of third-hand off-the-record comments? So just to recap, our process so far has involved a pop-up session that most people didn't know about, a letter drop inferring that this was a done deal, which the claims in this motion validate, by the way. We completely forgot that a petition of over 200 signatures was submitted opposing this, and now we have a recommendation to overturn the area that we've reached as a council on the basis that Councillor Dennison says that the landowner says that they feel we've breached good faith, so they'll now potentially be obstructive to the parts of the development we value. Good faith. So to you in the gallery, I'm so very sorry that we are treating our own decision-making processes with such flippancy and inconsistency. These people have worked for a whole year to figure out our processes, to meet our requirements, and to engage in this process the way we dictate that they do. And all the landowners had to do is have a private wine to a few of you, and hey presto, notice of motion. Different rules for different players. I will urge you, all of you, to remember the principles of natural justice and of good decision-making, and the oaths that you swore in this room to uphold the Local Government Act 2002. Please, please join me in upholding our own process. Shame on us if this goes through.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to ask, through you, if the officers might like to comment on what has been suggested as a terrible flaw in our process. I know Councillor Johnson raised the question and it was answered by Councillor Dennison, but I wondered if the officers have a comment.
Does somebody want to comment?
Perhaps just to start off with, Councillor, I'd just understand the comment about a flaw in the process. What do you consider to be the flaw?
That we are in this process taking into consideration effectively a submission that's off the books.
Through the chair, I think our democracy and governance manager explained the process about bringing a notice of motion to the table. So as far as in terms of procedural matters, we've followed the procedures that have been presented to us.
And would you have any comment on the inference that the developer expected an outcome of this process that we have not delivered?
Through the chair, no, I probably don't have a comment on that. The process is followed as through submissions, hearings and the like, and that as well. The elected members have rights to bring notice of motions back to the table.
Okay, thank you. To move to comment, if I may, Mr. Mayor. I was not in the chamber for this original debate, not being a member of this committee in a way at the time. So I followed it with interest, but from a little bit of a distance. At the time, reading the papers and not being here for the debate, the officer's recommendation seemed to me to be perfectly sensible. Submissions, however, did not support the officer's recommendation. The expressed wish of the community did not support that recommendation. And so I could see how the committee came to the recommendation that it did to move away from the officer's recommendation in this case. And I, maybe with hindsight, slightly naively expected that that would go through council, even though, had I been at that meeting, I may well have voted for the officer's recommendation. Who knows? But what I won't vote for today is this inference, gossip, innuendo that is being brought into the chamber. I feel that that's inappropriate to our processes. We engaged with the community in good faith. I expect that we engaged with the developer in good faith, and our processes need to stand up to that kind of public scrutiny. So whatever my decision might have been at committee, today I'm voting for good process, which is against this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Finlay.
It's just a question. Why did we have a notice of motion on something that council had not already approved?
We've already gone through that.
I'm still not sure why.
Yeah. I'll let the council have a second, the officer have a second go at it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to take elected members a step back. So what we're doing right now is we're considering recommendations from committee. That's the first step in this process. So the chair has the ability under the LGA to put the recommendations of committee in several ways. They can move that you adopt the recommendation from committee, that you amend the recommendation from committee, or that you not adopt the recommendation from committee. This is the first step that you're making today. So the first thing that Councillor Jennison is moving is to not adopt the recommendation that came from committee. It is still a recommendation from committee. That's the first step. If you choose to not adopt, then the second step would be to consider the recommendations which are on the screen, which just so happen to be the same recommendations that failed at committee. That is why you have the 9 signatures, because the recommendations that are being put as the alternative are a repeat notice of motion. So the first step that you're making is to decide whether you agree to not adopt the recommendations from committee. The second piece is the overturn piece.
So the notice of motion wasn't needed. We could have just gone through the committee process and altered it there and amended the recommendations at the committee, approving the committee
Through you,
minutes.
Mr. Mayor, no. You could have amended them without a notice of motion.
Yes.
But because what Councillor Jennison is putting is a direct repeat of something that failed earlier, a notice of motion was required and met the public notice timeframes.
Okay, thank you.
Back to you, Councillor, for right of reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, members, for your comments and your views. This notice of motion was off advice. It was a process that I understood needed to happen to revert back to the decision-making of the recommendations, and so I've gone through that. As far as good faith, I did engage in this process with good faith, and probably reference back to the comments I made back to the submitters after the committee vote. But what's come about is a fair process of councillors coming and indicating a change in mind on the decision-making that they made at committee. Whether that was swayed by the emotion on the debate, or and I believe probably a bit of time to work out actually the value proposition that it lands on. And that is fair for members to do. to come to each debate with an open mind, considering all points of decision-making. Consultation for sure, but also the budget implications, the wider community input, any engineering, any legal, any other Consultation is one tool to help aid our decision-making process. To say that it's the worst example of decision-making or bringing forward and how disturbing and disappointing and they're again, emotive words to suggest that this has not been a fair process to pick up on, and suggesting that one comment, informal comment, is motivated this response from not only me, but other members. And I would dilute that completely, knowing that in many debated issues, we've got members of our public suggesting in different areas around the pros and cons ongoingly. It doesn't stop once the consultation process finishes. So I just find that a little bit overreached and overstated that all of a sudden that one person's comment to an individual is swaying everybody's argument here, when it's not. That goes against all the evidence of the officer's advice and the ongoing decision-making percolation that members go through. So I just bring in perspective on the considerations that we need to make, the time frames that we need to make them in, and the ability to actually, and the freedom that we have in this land to change our view. Going into the cost implications, going through the long-term plan, it's clear to see we can't fund everything. And this value, the value of this land, I guess, is being swayed as really we can get a better outcome, and we need to be smart around how we use our assets and our cash for our investment to get good outcomes for our whole community. And I guess that's also been a weighing up decision for this.
Point forward, Mr. Mayor. Councillors bring in new information right reply. Going to be responding to comments.
Yep, and I'm happy to withdraw that if that's is acceptable. But really, I feel like we have got the freedoms to change our view, and right now we get the chance to vote how we wish. I will make the point that it was an 8-5 vote at committee. Not everyone was there, and as has been mentioned in comment, and so that does allow for other members to come through and express a view that weren't in that part of that process. But I'll leave it to the vote now, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Look, right, so what we've got here is 6923 Waterloo Park Land Exchange Proposal Decision. We just need to vote on this part first, and that council not adopt clause 6923 from the Strategy Finance Committee, 15th of November 2023, moved by you as the Chair, seconded by the Deputy. And we will vote on this, just this part now, just number 1. Thank you. And that is passed, 8 votes for, 7 against and 1 abstention. So we will now go to the notice of motion. We've already debated that. And we will bring that up. And the notice of motion around the Waterloo Park Exchange. I'm not going to read all of those comments. There's 1 to 4 that have been read out by the councillor. So we will vote on this, please. And that again is passed, 8 votes for, 7 against and 1 abstention. All right. We will move through now to number 24, which is the Community Committee, and that is on page 305. And I'll ask the chair of that committee, Councillor Johnson, to speak to her recommendations, please.
I'll just beg your patience for a minute since my computer has given me this circle wheel of death. So I'm just going to borrow Councillor Isabella's computer.
It's 305 of your papers, councillors.
Where's technology when you need it, eh? Okay. I would like to present the Part 1 Public Community Committee recommendations from the 22nd November meeting for adoption.
And we have a seconder, which is the Deputy Chair, Councillor Hancock. Okay, Councillor Harpiter.
Could I have 46, 23 separated, please?
Yes, sure we can. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. That same item, the additional social housing budget, can I declare an interest? Being involved with Homes for People, we've been engaged with the subsequent design process in that. So I'll withdraw for that item. For that item.
Okay. Councillor Wood.
Could we also have 42, 23 separated?
42 community reference groups. Okay. Are there any further matters arising or commentary to these? Okay, there being none, we will go to the first. Which one are we doing first? Okay, we're going to do 43, 44 and 47 first. Okay, we'll vote, please. And it's passed 16 votes for, none against. Thank you. Okay, the next one. We will do 46 next, which is a additional social housing budget. And can you vote, please? And that has passed 13 votes for, 1 against and 1 abstention. And then we come to number 42, is that correct? All right, which is around community reference groups. If you could vote, please. And that has passed 11 votes for and 3 against. Last one. Okay, we'll revote this one. Don't think it's going to have any difference, but for the record, if you could vote again on 42, please. And this time it votes for and 5 against. Okay. We move through to the final presentation of committee recommendations, and this is from the Sustainability Committee from the 29th of November, and I'll ask the Chair, Councillor Barrett, to speak to those.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and colleagues. My pleasure to present the recommendations of the Part 1 Public Sustainability Committee meeting of the 29th of November 2023 for adoption.
And seconded by Councillor Isabella. Okay, no matters raising. We will take the vote, please. And that has passed 13 votes for, with 3 abstentions. All right, I'm going to move the rates debate next, but we will have a quick break before that, because I suspect that might take a while. So if we could be back into the chamber, please, at 10:30. Thank you. Kia ora, welcome back, people. Sorry, running a little bit late there. All right. We now are going to have, we bring up item 15, page 101 of your papers, around the rating system review. It's been a long time coming, and I invite Steve Patterson and Cameron from our finance to speak to this. Gentlemen.
Good morning, Mr Mayor and councillors. You made reference at the start of the meeting to being 44th anniversary of meeting in this hall, and I think I might be the only person in the room who, as a member of the management team of the day, was part of that meeting. So it is quite an honour to be here again, still 44 years later, and I guess on this topic I have presented in this chamber quite a number of times, so it's an interesting journey talking about rates, and it's one that you can spend an inordinate amount of time digging yourself into a bigger hole, I guess, and having to go way back up again to try to make sure you're looking at the big picture and to really understand what it is that you're trying to achieve each time that you think about this. Rates, as you all know, and I've mentioned in here before, are a tax, and that means that they come with particular responsibilities on the council in terms of thinking about what's fair and what's appropriate in terms of a tax. But in the end, it does become a council call, having regard for the various principles that are outlined in the legislation and the rules and things about the way rates are set. But in the end, it's the council's call about what are appropriate in terms of rates. You've asked us to come back and give you guidance and advice on a range of things to do with the rating system, and we've done that over the years in a variety of ways. On this occasion, the report that you've got in front of you is not a very, very large, long report, like could have been the case had I incorporated all of the material that you've had over time. But both time and, I guess, my thoughts about the paper that we create made me think that it's best to try and, at this stage at least, think about some principles, what it is we're trying to achieve, and once we can put some stakes in the ground, move forward from there, I guess. So that's why we've got the recommendations framed the way they are, to try to just get from you the things that you feel drive the way you think about it. And once we've done that, then that will give us enough guidance to be able to bring the material back for your further consideration in February as part of the material for the draft long-term plan. What, I guess, the choices, in the end, a rating system is a combination of several things. It's we have the ability to set some fixed components of the rates, and for the moment, in our council, we've used the Uniform Annual General Charge and the fixed charges for water and wastewater and the rubbish and recycling activities. And they seem to have worked, well, the charges for servers seem, from my perspective, to have worked pretty well over the years. In the case of the wastewater charge, we do have what's called a PAN charge, which means that those commercial entities that have a large number of pans get charged per pan. And in the case of water, those extraordinary consumers, commercial ones, they get metered. So it means that that does cope with those that are anything but normal. So, and those water charges are considered to be a rate as well under the legislation today. In terms of the combination of things that are appropriate, it boils down to a view. In the end, it's a judgment call. And it depends what things you take into consideration as to which things you think are the most important in making that judgment call. We've for many years felt that it was important to have a common system right through the city. And I guess we're small enough as a city in terms of physical size to be able to do that. There's basically people throughout the city have the ability to have a similar level of service from the council in relation to all of the different activities that the council's involved in. And those particular ones where there's some identifiably different level of service, like the waters and wastewaters and the rubbish collection, then we are separately identifying those as a targeted rate that means that only the properties that have access to that service get charged for them. The experience here over the last period has been that when there's been a revaluation, that's particularly drawn our attention to the land value and the movements in the land value. And that's one of the particular incentives for you to have asked us to look at options. And you've decided in principle that you feel the capital value is a mechanism that better reflects people's ability to pay, or wealth, if you like, land value does, that people understand perhaps the capital value better. The land value is not something that you go out and trade very often, and there's not so many transactions for land on its own. Having said that, the land value does have its proponents, and a number of councils, particularly in this lower mid North Island region, our compatriot regional cities, many of them still use the land value based system, though other bigger metropolitan centres have progressively over the last 20 years or so moved to a capital value based system. It's intriguing to me, I guess, that I see one or two of the biggest cities actually reflecting on whether or not that's serving them well. And although they haven't progressed forward to make the change, the Wellington City Council have noted in their consultation material just in the last few months that they've been considering whether or not the land value might be better for their particular circumstances at the moment. And they're having to address, like Christchurch is, the fact that certainly for vacant land they've got concerns in their central cities about what the capital value system is doing for them, and they've tried to implement, both of them, some more penal types of rates for the capital value for those more vacant types of properties. In terms of what I've done here now in this report is show some options in terms of how they would impact on different groups of ratepayers and individual ratepayers. Once we've received from you, as I said a little bit earlier, the guidance from today, we'll be able to model more specifically particular things and to be more fully aware than we are as of today, the implications right across the board. We have, as part of the modelling, tried to understand all those ones who would be most affected at either end, and to see what most affected by a change, should I say, and to see how we might cope with those. But having said that, there will always be, if we change the system, a period of settling down during any implementation phase, and it would be nice, I think, if we did make a change, to have that done in a progressive way, so that we'd have the chance to address any things that we hadn't thought about in terms of implications, and find ways through those without it actually having a very significant impact on either the ratepayers themselves or the council's own revenue. Particularly conscious at the moment that we're in an environment that you're working through with us at the moment in terms of the funding of the council for the next few years, and particularly the rates for the next year, and that there's every likelihood the rates increase is going to be quite high in historical terms. And so that any change that's made to the system will be accentuated, I suppose, for some, up and down, I guess, through any changes to the total rates that might be required for this coming year. And so I guess for that reason as well, it's seemed to me appropriate that if a change is to be made, that in this first year, if it is to happen from the 1st of July 24, then we look to moderate that and have it at the lower end of the scale of change, I suppose, because the combination of those two things will mean quite a bit to individual ratepayers. And I think it is the case that whenever we look to consult with the public about rates matters, the most response we get is once the bills have gone out, because people then really appreciate what the impact is. And so I suppose, again, for those ratepayers who live well, who don't keep themselves as up to date as others in terms of what's going on in the city, then it is, I think, my suggestion that if there is to be a change, that we do make it, I suppose, relatively light, I suppose, in the first year, and that it is one way of actually ratepayers being able to get to grips with the implications for them and to plan for it a bit longer than they might have if the change is significant. If it's a significant increase, that is. If we do that, of course, those who might see themselves as benefiting from any change would have to wait a bit longer to gain the benefit. We recognise that. So in terms of where we're at, I don't think that there's anything that it's worth me trying to reinforce for you. As I said, you've set the you're familiar with the reasons why the change, what is being suggested. Actually, I've just had another thought. I will mention a couple of other things. By having a capital value-based system does increase the rating base a little bit, because there are utilities in the road that are currently not rated and would be rated if there is a capital value-based system of any sort. As you're aware from the paper, there's nearly 3/4 of the value of those utilities is in utilities owned by the council itself, the water, the wastewater and the stormwater. So although there would potentially be significant millions of dollars of additional rates levied on those properties, only a relatively small portion, depending upon how the stuff was categorised, would be new from an external source. But it would mean that if we did charge our own services for rates, and we do that as a matter of course, then there would be some need to adjust the rates and charges for the waters to reflect that increased cost that was being charged to them. That's something that we haven't worked through in detail as to just how that would, well, we've had some options, but we haven't included that in the papers at the moment because it was just something that it would matter who benefits from that additional revenue, I guess. At the moment, in these papers, we've assumed just that would be a bonus for the moment, but that the comparisons are are designed to get roughly the same amount of revenue from each of the groups as what we do at the moment in terms of those comparisons that we've made. But ultimately, when a proposal is brought back to you, it would make it a call about how that was being treated, or give options about how that would be treated.
All right, Steve.
That's
We've
it.
got a few questions, and I'm sure we can get you to respond. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Steve. Okay. I've got a question, first of all, about the implications of the choice that we consult on. So I understand that we have to consult on our preferred choice. If, whatever that might be, if the submissions that come back are not supportive of that preferred choice, what happens then? Do we need, if we then decide, okay, so our preferred choice isn't supported, do we then need to go out to a further round of consultation for a different system?
Yes, that's a tricky point. It seems to me that it's wise for us to include our preferred option plus a couple of other options, so that whatever result is the final outcome that you decide on is not so different from what's finally adopted that it would have had lots of people make submissions otherwise. So I think the test about the extent of the difference from what options have been given is important in the end.
Okay, so that will be addressed by providing a range of other options in the submission, in the consultation material?
In the material, although
Yeah.
the pros and cons is just to how much we give there, because we just confuse everybody and make it really difficult to have that material that's in a form that's appropriate. But yes, what we're suggesting there is that at least there are three, but there could be perhaps one or two more, or an ability for people to be able to find out what the effects would be of various things. We do know that we're going to be challenged quite significantly through our website to be able to provide the material that would be required for a number of options, and so that's something that we are working on, but is currently not as useful as it might be in terms of the way we could go about it, and so that's something we'll have to address in the new year.
Okay. And in terms of the transition arrangements, I understand why you've suggested 3 years, and you've discussed that previously. But if the change, if a change is agreed that would result in quite significant differences for ratepayers, could it be transitioned over a longer period, like say 5 years?
Yes, it could be. I mean, there's no, but I guess there are pros and cons to that. The pros are that, yes, it gives people a longer period to be able to prepare for it and to accept the level of change. The cons that really I think other councils have found is that it gets really complex trying to keep in touch with all the changes that go on over a period, to keep in touch with what is as a result of the change and what's as a result of other things that are happening. And I know that Hamilton, for example, started off with a desire to spread their change over up to 10 years, but in the end brought it back to 3 after their first year. Because, well, if you think about it, next year there's a revaluation. A revaluation alters things again, potentially. And just then trying to work out, well, is something that's happened as a result of the revaluation or as a result of the system change becomes just about impossible to get to grips with and to explain. And also, the capital value is one where, unlike the land value, that can change at any time for people because they might have additions to their property or new development or whatever. So the capital value will change. And that means then find you've got a new property that's got much, much higher rates than what it would have had previously, and it's all because the property and the nature of the property has changed.
Okay. Well, so the answer is yes, but you wouldn't advise it. Is that fair?
I guess in summary.
Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, for the presentation. If I could take your attention to page 126 of the report, or page 20 of the review of rating system. That addresses the question of a rates remission scheme as a way of mitigating the extremities. And what it says is other councils have been approached in an effort to find out how they address the situation, but to date nothing useful has been obtained. In the meantime, then, it is believed there is not a practical means of applying an all-embracing policy remissions regime. So I just want to get my understanding clear. What you're saying there is the reason given for not looking at a rating remission scheme is because it hasn't been done in the past, not because it's impossible.
A bit of both, actually. I'm still looking to other councils to see if I can get something from them that dates back a bit that might be useful. But in terms of whether it will work or not, the problems that I see are particularly for commercial properties, where things change in terms of the nature of those properties quite a lot, as to whether someone can afford the rates or not, whether they're fair or not. A lot of judgment has to go into that, and I just feel that a remission policy, especially for commercials, is going to be really, really difficult to administer fairly, and it would be quite hard to develop criteria that would cover all situations and pass the test. And it, of course, means that whenever a remission is given, you have to budget for what you think is going to be the uptake of that remission in order for the council to end up with the revenue that it needs to balance the books, and that may be difficult to assess in the first instance as well.
I appreciate that, but I guess the difficulty I have with that answer is that, well, what if other councils looked to all the other councils in the country and saw nobody had done it before, and so their judgment was, well, we're not going to do it because nobody's done it. I mean, so I'm appreciating your comment that it's difficult. Would it not be a political judgment to make in the chamber the mechanism and the way that a remission scheme would work, and is that not something we could make a... I mean, it is subjective, but could we make that subjective decision?
Well, yes, the council's got its right to make a call about any of these things, that's for sure, and my job's to advise you about what might be possible and practical. And so at the moment, I guess in summary, I'm still looking at ways of coming back to advise you further about that, because I'm not satisfied that I've been able to give you the full answer just yet.
I appreciate that. I'll move on to a different line of questioning. Could you just talk us through why Wellington is considering reverting to some sort of hybrid rather than full capital? I think it's a useful learning. I don't know the answer.
I haven't spoken to them directly, but I've just looked at their public material, and it seems that they're finding that, at least from the council's perspective, that they're needing some more incentives for central city development, and they're particularly the central city area that they are concerned about, that the rates, perhaps in the way that they've set them, haven't generated an appropriately high level, and so they were looking at options, and it just happened that the land value option is one of the things that they were considering. I know that there are people who've presented papers to other major councils as well, where they've sort of not progressed a serious intent to change. Okay. In Wellington's case, the summary that they've got of their decisions for the moment are that they're going to trial a premium, if you like, on some nominated area of the city to see how that goes, and they're going to do a further review in the next year or so.
Appreciate that. And so, sorry, just a simple question. Do other councils have a hybrid capital land value system, or would this be a first if we did it?
So there are a number of councils that have some rates, targeted rates charged on one or other of the bases, but I'm not sure whether others describe their system as a hybrid system or not, but the majority of councils that have I think the majority of the metros that I'm aware of would have a full capital value system.
Appreciate it. And so, in your comments at the start of this, you alluded to the fact that we've tried across a number of years to have one coherent system of rates across the city and put out the advantages of that. But is the implication of that that there are cities that don't have one coherent base unit for all of their rates across the city? Is that something that has been done before? My understanding was we weren't allowed to do that.
Yes, well, when the city was extended in 1989, it was one of the, I guess, criteria that we used that when the likes of Ashurst and the like were brought into the city, that they would be rated in the same way, that the values would be treated the same, get the same rates. Other councils at the time were made up of lots of different smaller councils, a lot of, I suppose, rural ones had lots of different schemes for things, and they perpetuated those into the new councils, a lot of them, and now they've taken years to unwind them. They've tried to smooth those. I know that Manawatu districts found that they've tried to what they've called harmonise them so that they're not perpetuating a lot of those individual little schemes. There are situations in some of those other centres where there are distinctly different levels of service being provided, but I think in our case, I think we're quite well that we have a common system right through the city.
I appreciate that, and we smooth it through differentials, but I think that's a very interesting point. So could it be a situation where Ashurst was rated on a capital value system, for example, but Palmerston North is rated on a land value system, or does it all have to operate within the same one base unit?
As far as the general rate's concerned, you can only have one basis, be the land or the capital.
That was my understanding. And just last question, Mr. Mayor, I promise, on a different route. What is the revaluation mechanism after development takes place? So currently, if you build on an empty section, well, it doesn't really matter because it doesn't have a material difference to your land value. But the system we're going into, if you build an empty section, your capital value will increase. So is that done once every 3 years at the time of revaluation, or does development on a site trigger a revaluation and in turn trigger effectively a rate increase for that development?
At the moment, the valuers do both the land and capital value for us at both revaluation time and at the time when a property changes. And the values that are created are actually used by Horizons for setting their rates at the moment. So that whole process exists.
So it's when property changes.
A property is rated on its values as at the 30th of June. So if there's something, and the valuers look through the period up to the 30th of June to get all of those CCCs reviewed, all the properties checked, and values are altered as at that date, so that the rates are set for that next year based on the property as it stands at that time.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Steve. Just a question initially around transition arrangements and kind of the timing thereof. Can you talk us through the option of delaying implementation?
I guess in terms, well, the first next rates year is the 1st of July 24, so a change could operate from that date, either in some small way or a bigger way, depending upon what you decide. You could decide, I suppose, to implement it from the 1st of July the following year, if you wanted to. The 1st of July 25 will be following a revaluation that's done in September 2024, and the new values will take effect. So I guess there's no right time to make a change like this. The only benefit, well, one benefit, I suppose, of a delay beyond 1 July 25 would be it gives further time for people to better understand and get what's coming, if there was, for those that get a big increase.
Thanks. So if we were to delay 12 months and then do a 3-year transition, that would be effectively 4 years to full implementation if we were to go towards capital value? Yeah, okay, thank you. And can I just have it confirmed here? I think I've understood it from workshops, but in terms of in the commercial space, would more businesses see an increase in rates or a decrease in rates?
I don't have that figure off the top of my head. I guess it depends on a number of things. It depends on the total rates that are taken from that sector, on whether we change what's considered to be commercial or not and rated that way. If we look at the vacant land suggestions I've got in this report, and if we consider the utilities to be commercial, as I have suggested they would be, then I think, no, I don't know the answer off the top of my head in terms of the numbers.
All right, that's all right. We'll park that one there, and I think that's the end of my questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Happer.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Steve and Cam. My questions are around the hybrid system. Have you, in all your 40 years of working with the council, ever proposed a hybrid system before?
Yes, I have.
And how did it go down?
We've come really close at times. Perhaps a casting vote by the mayor or somebody one day stopped it from happening. It's always been the mechanism for getting to the full capital value, if that's where the answer was going to be the final answer the council wanted, because it's really the only mechanism that works.
Okay. Second question around hybrid is the ratios. Can we go out consult without the ratios?
Well, it depends what you mean by consult without the ratios. If you're, I think it's appropriate for you to try to decide whether you're heading for a full capital value based system, and therefore then consulting on the transition, and that would show the mix.
No, you're missing my question. If we're in a hybrid, yeah, we're in hybrid.
Yes.
So, and we didn't want the ratios, so could we do that?
If you had one particular option in mind, are you suggesting, in terms of what the split would be?
We just wanted to consult on the hybrid model, but not consult on what the ratio was.
Yeah, through the chair, just see if I can help there, is that, no, you do have to, if you're going out for consultation, you do need to be quite specific about the options that you're
Yep, I wanted the answer for that. Thank you for the answer. Okay, my next question is, what do you suggest the ratio should be?
I guess first I'd be asking if it's a hybrid model, and the hybrid model is your desired outcome for the end. It's a matter of how far through, what proportion. Personally, I don't have a view about what was the desired outcome for the end.
Does the chief executive want to help?
Through the chair. Our job is to provide you with some options about what it might look like in the detail on that. Your decision to decide which option you'd like to go out with.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's my questions.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. In response to Councillor Johnson's question around consultation, you mentioned that we could give a range, but that there was limitations with that. If, in terms of just comparing consulting on full capital value versus consulting on a hybrid, if we were to consult on moving to capital value, and then the feedback indicated that, you know, if council wanted to pull back on that somewhere closer to status quo and opt for a hybrid, is that an option?
My feeling is that we need to describe some of those hybrid options so that if the proposal was to go to full capital value, well, I guess you wouldn't be I doubt you'd be proposing that that would happen in 1 year, because that's just not practical.
Yeah.
If you were proposing that it was going to, if you wanted to go there and go over a period, say 3 years, then what we'd need to be describing to the public is what they would be hit with in year 1, 2, 3, if you like, as best we could. If the desire was just to be a hybrid as the final outcome, then it would be dependent upon the extent of that hybrid in terms of what the ratios were as to whether just quite what information we needed to show and how many options we needed to show. The smaller the level of change, if you like, from the status quo, the less.
So, sorry, perhaps I'll rephrase my question. I might not have. So, really, what I'm interested in, I acknowledge that the preference is to consult on the preferred option and for that to be one option. Really, what I'm trying to understand is the options for us, the optionality that we might have following that consultation. So, if we're here and status quo is here, capital value is here, but a ratio is obviously somewhere in between. If we consulted on a hybrid, we couldn't then adopt a full capital value program, could we? But I'm presuming that's the case. But if we consulted on a full capital value, could it then be pulled back closer to status quo and being a hybrid? Have I made that a bit clear?
Yeah, yes, you have. I think it's tricky in terms of what's going to be seen as materially different. We need to, the council, in terms of adopting, I think needs to have been able to demonstrate to the public perhaps the preferred option plus what might be likely, I suppose, fallback options if it wasn't the preferred option, so that people who could see how they would be influenced would make a submission based on the facts of what they've been shown. Because I think if you went either way, if you consulted on a full capital value and then chose to go only part way there, but hadn't shown that material in the presentation, in the public consultative material, you run the risk of those who would have made a submission in the first place not actually doing so, because they wouldn't, they would be differently impacted.
So what's the best way for us not to have the risk of having to reconsult?
Good question. Could I just get the CE to speak to that?
Yes, through Chair. So the consultation process of what we would be putting out is probably, I would suggest, 3 options. It might be status quo, a hybrid, and whatever decision you might make around what that hybrid actually looks like, and the other one might be full capital. In which case then, depending on the material, and you would have a preference as to which one you would go out with. But Steve's right in terms of the final decision that you need to make doesn't necessarily needs to be not material difference to those options that you have actually put out. So if it came back and, for instance, you settled on whatever hybrid, for instance, hypothetically, whatever hybrid option you went out with, if you got a bunch of submissions came back that said, you know, we prefer something that looks a little bit more like this, then that's okay for you to make that decision. But we'll wrap up a little bit more around this as well, I think, just in order for you to be, in terms of the consultation document that goes out. So when you see that, we'll make sure that we cover off the points that you're raising today more clearly. Does that help?
Okay, so if I'm understanding that we need to have a preferred option,
yes,
but that we can produce perhaps 2 or 3
yes,
options in the consultation. Okay, yep,
right,
that's helpful. And my other question was around the additional revenue from utilities, the non-council owned ones. Do we have an estimate of approximately how much revenue we might get if on the full capital value, if we move to full capital value?
All right.
my recollection, it depends a little bit on the differentials that are applied as to just quite how that will work. But it could be the non-council bits, maybe up to $1.5 million, perhaps.
Okay, thank you. That's all from me.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Steve. Look, I'm just trying to sort of get a little bit better understanding of the recommendations 2, 3 and 4. Under 2 there you've got, in the hybrid there, you've got 30, 70, 40, 60, and now we've got 5 options there, right? And I think originally we had just a couple. The order there is 30, 70, is that 30% land and 70% capital value? Is am I reading that right? So then if we go to recommendation 3, that recommends going in one step, which is 2A, which is 30/70, and then the next recommendation then goes transition over 2 years. So am I assuming correctly that 2A perhaps has less impact in terms of
the change?
Of the change,
yes? Yes, because it's got a, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I've misled you. If it was 70/30, would be the one that has the least change for current ratepayers. 70% land, 30% capital. So this is wrong, I have to admit, in terms of the recommendation. I'm sorry. It should say really that if 2E was agreed, that it be in one step, and the others to A through D would be over 2 years. Apologies for that.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I assume that will just be altered according to the recommendations in the papers.
No more questions?
Yeah, no, I'm just checking to see that we're actually going to be able to resolve the error in the recommendations so that everybody's clear.
I think it'd be clearer if if LV and CV is put next to the breakdowns. Then it's very clear for everybody. Otherwise, it could easily get quite flip-floppy. Yeah,
but sorry, Mr Mayor, the recommendation under number 3, it should be 2E be agreed. If 2E be agreed, then that could be implemented 1 July in 2024 in one step. So it's just a matter of making sure that everybody is very clear as to what has the least impact in terms of the change.
Sorry, I missed that. So we take out number 4. We take out the E.
So number 3 should be 2E rather than 2A.
Right. Okay.
It would be 2A, not E.
Okay, I got you. Yep, I'm clear now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. That's my questions.
Okay. Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Ngā mihi, Steve. I'm just looking at page 119 of our papers, 13 of the review, and I'm looking at the 2 paragraphs in bold at the bottom of that page. And I just wanted to unpack that a little. It's referring to rural and semi-service properties, but it says there in bold the first paragraph relates to land value, and the second paragraph relates to capital value, and it says further work needs to be done to assess what might be a reasonable differential in the event that a portion of the rates is based on the capital value, and this will be addressed when preparing a more detailed proposal. Just wondering why we wouldn't have delved into that CV work for the purposes of this, but we have for the land value?
Ran out of time, to be honest. We do need to do more work, and we realised that as we were nearing the end of preparing the paper, that there was something perhaps in bringing the material together that we needed to do, and the time that wasn't available to be able to do that.
Thank you. And council gave an indication or an in-principle decision that we'd be looking at CV in 2021. Is that correct?
Sorry, I didn't understand your question.
I'll leave it there. Just moving on, relating to Councillor Wood's questions about Wellington considering land value, was I right in understanding your answer to say that they're considering that because city centre revenue is not sufficient and that's a move to try and increase their revenue?
The rates, they think, on some of their central city properties are too low, relatively.
So that's potentially not motivated by fairness or lease change, but on generating revenue?
Well, not generating revenue per se, but the way they see what's an appropriate rate for those properties.
Okay, so proportionality. Thank you. And finally, in the report, it does talk about looking at levers or options for properties that might be adversely or over impacted by this change, if it goes ahead or if one goes ahead. I'm wondering that does happen to some extent now. There are some people who are quite adversely impacted by land values, and I'm wondering, do we offer any, what levers do we offer to smooth the impacts for them for what's happening under our current system, and how might that compare to a new system?
We don't offer any options at the moment for people at the time of the revaluation. We have a policy of rates postponement that we've never ever used. It's one about severe hardship, really, where a charge would be placed on the property. But we've managed to work through with people who need time to be able to pay their rates. And so at the moment, it's just every 3 years, I guess, is where in the last two revaluations, some properties have had reasonably significant changes. But I guess the scale of the change is nothing like the scale of the change that would happen, especially for commercial properties, under it, if you change the whole base. And that's why we're needing to think a little bit differently than what we would just in the normal 3-yearly revaluation cycle.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, obviously rate systems are bespoke everywhere. It seems otherwise we'd have one size fits all. So who's the watchdog on this? Who do you go to get approval? Is it the auditor or?
The council itself authors of its own destiny in terms of what you consider to be an appropriate rating system that's devolved entirely to councils. I guess the only things that drive it are the particular legislation about the things that need to be considered in setting up rating systems, and I've advised you about those.
Right, okay. And if we did go to a hybrid type model, do we have to tell people, or is there some, so the split, do we need to go to a split and explain this? Do we need to explain how splits are done?
Well, I guess in terms of people trying to understand our rating system, I've said to you in the past that I think our rating system is really, at the moment, basically as simple as it's possible to design one to be, or almost as simple as it's possible to design one. And that's important that rating systems, I think, are straightforward, otherwise people get confused. In terms of what we need to explain, I've mentioned in the report, and I just remind us all again, that if we charge part of the rates on something, well, we need to describe what that bit for the second rate is actually funding. Because I think I alluded to the fact a little bit earlier that the legislation says you can only have one basis for a general rate. So then you say to yourself, well, if we're going to have the general rate on one or other of these bases, what are we going to have as the base for charging the other rate? And in our feeling, I guess, at the moment, in terms of the advice we've given you before, is that if the capital value was anything like up to about 30% of the value of the rates, at least as they were set for 23-24, we haven't analysed those for 24-25 yet, but that would roughly support the rates funding that goes into the Goal 1 activities of the council. That's basically transport and economic development. And those activities, those of us who've talked about it feel that there's quite a good nexus between capital value and those particular functions of the council. If the capital value component was more than that, then at the moment we don't have a particular suggestion as to what activities would be targeted to be funded, but that's something we'll come back to with if you choose to go further than the 30%.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Steve. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding a couple of graphs here. So if we look at the commercial industrial properties on page 140 of the agenda, or page 34 of the rating system review, and the different scenarios that you've modelled there, is it fair to say that under 100% capital value base, more commercial properties will be paying less rates?
Look, as I said, I'm not sure that I can say that exactly. I haven't added them up to see, but but the spread, it depends on the combination of the UAGC and the like. But there are certainly quite a number. Oh, and I know the other thing going to impact on that is that we've got quite a few. They've been categorised. Sorry, I was about to lead off on a tangent, which is about the vacant properties that form part of this, but they're in the miscellaneous category at the moment. So, yeah, there looks like there's quite a few who do benefit from the full capital value system at the moment. Yeah, but I guess the caveat I've got is we need to just really review in much more detail yet still the level of the differential that would be appropriate to charge, and that may influence some in terms of what they're showing there. But
okay, thank you. So that confirms my understanding of that. And then on page 32, when we're looking at single unit residential properties, percentage change in rates for various scenarios. What that looks like to me is, and again, please tell me if I'm wrong, that scenario 3, which is 67% land value and 33% capital value, produces the least change. Is that a correct interpretation?
yeah, I guess the higher the proportion of land value, the least change is going to be from the status quo.
Right, okay. And so the scenario 1 of the 100% capital value base, which is the pink bars there, it's a bit hard to know in terms of numbers, but possibly the weighting is towards more reduction than it is more towards increases, or is it fairly evenly split?
I think it's reasonably evenly split, but I don't have those figures in front of me. And I think in the end for 24-25, there's also the complicating factor that I don't like to raise, but I will, and that's we don't know yet the split of the total rate between the general and the various targeted rates for the waters.
Okay, no, I was just asking about that particular graph and what it showed. Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just one further question. Sorry, the page that we were on before, now I've lost it. Yeah, 140. Oh, no, it wasn't that. Sorry, I'll ask my question. Oh, where was it? Sorry, there was a table that we were looking at that had the land value to capital value ratio, and it was 1.6 for single resident. Yeah, sorry, thank you. It's page 119. That's helpful if I can actually have it in front of me. So that ratio for a single resident, single unit for residential, that's showing me that the actual percentage of the land value versus the improvements, it's quite a bit higher for land, about 63% versus 37% for the improvements. Is that correct? So that it doesn't show the improvements specified, but 739,000 minus 465,000 is 274,000. So the 274,000 being the average improvements versus the 465,000 being the average land. I'm understanding, if I can just get you to confirm if I'm understanding this correctly, that the land value, for a full capital value, if we were to move to full capital value, the land value component of that, would that be 63% and the improvements be 37%?
Well, just for the average property, yes.
For the
but
average
that's but of course, it's what we're concerned about is the ones at either end, really, in terms of the impact. Yes.
So if we were to water down a capital value by a hybrid, would that then increase the percentage of land quite considerably over and above the improve? If it's all, even for full capital value, it being 63% land for an average single residential unit versus 37% for the improvements, any watering down or hybrid of that improvements would shrink from 37% and the land would grow from 63%. Is that correct?
I wouldn't quite describe it in those terms, but I think the less improvements that there are, I'll say it the other way around. The more the improvements are in relation to the land value, the more a capital value will increase the rates they pay.
Yep. Okay, that's my understanding.
Yes.
My question really related to the proportion of for the average single unit residential, the portion of their rates that would be based on land versus their improvements.
Well, none of it's based on the improvements.
So
It's all either based on the land itself or the total value of the property.
Yep. So the
And
difference between capital value and land value is what?
Well, in the law it's called the improvements, but it's not valued as improvement. It's just the difference between those two values. So that they value the capital value. That's what people are prepared to pay for the whole thing. They value the land as a standalone best use, and then the difference is described as being the improvements. And so, but
okay.
in terms of, you'll see there was another graph somewhere that showed there's a whole range of ratios. Obviously, every property is different in terms of the ratio of its capital to land.
I'm aware of that. Yeah, I'm really just looking at the average and trying to clarify my thinking that improvements is about a third or just over a third, and land is still the predominant part of the full capital value. And you're confirming that is correct?
As it stands at the moment, that's true, and it's become more so, I suppose, in terms of the averages over the last revaluation or two, when land values have have increased markedly. As I mentioned in the report, there is an indication that might change a bit in proportionate terms at the next revaluation, but we'll just have to wait and see what the market does.
Okay, I think that's answered. Thank you.
Great. No further questions. All right. Thanks, Steve. Thank you, Cameron. Nothing to add from you? There's a big sigh. All right. So, councillors, we've got some recommendations up there, and I'm going to kick the ball off by recommending that we go to 1C, and that the hybrid would be split around E, 70 land value, 30% capital value, that we would go to number 3, that it occurs from 1 July 24 in one step. Number 6, number 7, number 8, number 9, and number 10. And councillors, I'm going to give you a little bit of rationale of why I'm doing that. And it gives rates are bespoke. I rang some of my colleagues around the countryside over the last couple of days, and I actually found it hard to get somebody that would actually be able to give me some guidance on this, other than a couple of my Metro colleagues said, be very careful and certainly bring your communities as much as you can on this journey. Hamilton, of course, have done this, and it was difficult, and if they had their time again, and I think they've actually spoken to our officers as well about what the do's and the don'ts, or how you could do it differently. It gives our community a chance to adapt to some pretty big changes. Yes, it's the least of those, and I've moved the hybrid 70 land, 30 capital, and there are many reasons why. First, and it's not the sole, affordability. Second, and especially in the extremes, the outliers, because with proposed rate increases this coming year, some will see over 100% increase in their rates. And that's mainly in the business sector, and I unashamedly do champion that sector. I don't think the economy, in my opinion, is spoken enough in this chamber. But also, as the officers confirmed, we do need to bring it back to what is the split? Why have you split it to that proportion? And the 30% goes a long way towards supporting the transport costs and our Goal 1 costs. And we will need to show the benefits to the sectors which we're going to change the most. And the business sector we will be able to show some benefits certainly around transport and economic. Because the third thing is, how do we defend a challenge? And those that have been around LAPs and other challenges with big business, it does get very difficult, and it is fraught with risk. Also, I want to protect the city's economy, especially around the commercial, business and industrial sectors, especially when we're trying to redevelop our city centre, attract partners in some of these sectors, especially the industrial and commercial sectors. To Tanganui, if we went to full capital, I think we'd probably have to stop to Tanganui, because we just would not attract anybody, and it'd be a case of last person out, turn the lights out, because we would become so unaffordable to that sector. Now, I respect everybody's opinions around the table, and there'll be some quite differing views to mine, I'm sure. But I also respect your expertise in what you do in your daytime jobs too. And mine is business. Unashamedly, I have been a business person, and it's something that I try to champion, and I do understand this stuff. And this will hurt business. It really will. So how do we minimise that impact? And also, we've got to understand the LTP now will be dominated by submissions on this. even with a hybrid change, and I've heard somebody say it's quite a change, and the majority will, in some of those sectors, be seeing at least 50 to 75% to over 100% increases in rates. So how do we manage that? We're likely to have quite a large rate increase this year, and I accept that, and I think we're all going to have to. And then we've got revaluations next year as well. Already businesses, quite hard to do in the city. We have a high business to residential differential. It's 3.5 to 1. It's one of the higher ones in the country. And staff have said in the report we can't really push that too much more. We have a tight district plan. Some may say a bit permissive. I certainly get questioned about it many times, and I know the staff do as well, and some other more business-orientated councillors do as well. We have tight conditions, and I personally do support some of these around the soils, the urban design, the full trade waste, and wastewater levies. But it's a fact. That's what's there now. So, also, if we go out with this, we can actually show some other options, and it gives some people some understanding. And if this ever was to get across the line, we also have the opportunity to change this in 3 to 6 years' time, once our community, and I do mean all sectors of our community, and the business sector is part of our community as well, get to understand and know what the costs are. So I'd ask you to support this if you can, please. I think it brings our community with us, it doesn't bankrupt the city, and it's a good place to start. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I won't be supporting these recommendations, and I'll just give notice that if they fail, I'll be moving 1B, 5A, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10, and my seconder is Councillor Naylor. So I'll just speak in opposition, and I want to address, first of all, the issue that I think is motivating the Mayor and perhaps others who are thinking of the hybrid, which is how does it affect business? And I think it's very important that we're all clear about how any changes might affect business. My read of the information that we've been provided with, and the office has confirmed it, is that under a 100% capital value system, more businesses would get a reduction in rates than would get an increase. And that's clearly shown in the graphs on page 140, where you can see that under the pink scenario, which is 100% capital value base, the graph is tending to the left, which is the reductions. So if we want to benefit business, we should be looking at 100% capital value base. Secondly, I do want to be clear that a hybrid, and particularly the hybrid that has been proposed, is not effectively a change proposal. So I think what we're going out to the community on here is an opportunity for a change in the rating base. And if we go out on a hybrid of 70% land and 30% capital value, as you will see from the graphs, that is the proposal of least change. And I think if we're going out to the community, we ought to give the option of actual change, not what's looking like a change, but will in effect be very little difference. As many of you know, since I was elected to this council, I've been advocating for a rates review, and I'm very happy to see it coming finally 7 years later. However, although I personally believe that a capital value system is a better system for everybody, business and residential, I'm just happy that we're actually now giving the residents and the ratepayers of the city the opportunity to have a say on it. I think that capital value will be a much better system, and I concede that we need to make a transition, that change needs to be done gradually, and that we want to minimise the effects on people as best we can. I quite liked Councillor Barrett's suggestion that we might not bring it in until 2025, and therefore it will be effectively a 4-year transition. But people relate to capital value. People know how much their properties are worth. When the land valuations come out, they don't really understand the impact that that's going to have on them. They relate to capital value when they buy a house or sell a house. That's what they're paying, the capital value. And so I think it's an easier system for people to understand. I'm concerned that with a hybrid, that it's even more complicated and difficult for people to understand how they're being rated. We know, and again it's shown in the material that we've been given on page 113, we know that capital values are much less volatile than land values. You only have to look at the figures in that table. They'll show you that valuations fluctuate much more to extremes on land value than capital value. And what's difficult for people to manage is when their rates change significantly as a result of a revaluation. And we know that because we had plenty of submissions to the annual plan in the revaluation year from people whose land value had gone up hugely, but their capital value, their total value, hadn't gone up by as much. And so moving to a capital value system would help sort out those very dramatic changes in land value. I think there are some other benefits as well that are mentioned in the paper. It widens the rating base. We can compare more easily our rates with those of other councils. But ultimately, I just believe that it's a fairer system because it taxes people on their land and improvements. And that's a much fairer representation of their ability to pay their rates. I admit there's always going to be edge cases and exceptions, but in general, I think that that's the case. And it probably also reflects the level of use of services that they make of the city as well. So to my mind, if you've got two neighbouring properties and one's an older 2-bedroom house and the other is a new 4 or 5 bedroom property, it stands to reason that those in the 4 or 5 bedroom property are going to be making greater use of council assets and services than those in the 2-bedroom property. So, ultimately, I just want to say I think we should go out on a capital value, 100% with a transition over 3 or possibly 4 years if we delay bringing it in, and see what people...
Sorry, your 5 minutes is well and truly up. If you could wrap it up, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. There's a lot more I could say, but I think the evidence speaks for itself here. And if you're going to vote based on evidence, particularly if you say you support business, then you should be supporting capital value.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I will also not be supporting the motion on the table and very happy to second the alternate of moving to a full capital value system, as Councillor Johnson has very well described. Just adding, I agree with the arguments she has already put forward, and just adding to those, the Mayor put out the economy and talked about not wanting to bankrupt the city. I think the purpose this is on the table is because we know about the cost of living crisis and we're wanting to find a fairer system, where a system that someone's ability to pay is more reflective of the system that we impose on them. I think it's well understood that if we had a blank sheet of paper and we were looking for the fairer system, we would never choose land value. So why would we then water this down with such a minimalistic way of proposing change? We might as well not propose any change at all. A 70%, 30% hybrid, when we look at the components of already for a single residential unit, that 63% of that is land already, 37% of that is improvements. If we then move to a hybrid, that's only 11% improvements that we're determining someone's rates based on, and 89% land. What's the point of that? We shouldn't even bother our community with consulting on something so watered down. Look, if we're going to do this, we should do it properly, we should do it right. Let's ask our community, let's propose to our community a preferred system being capital value and hear what they have to say. Yes, I think that can be, the consultation document can provide options such as a hybrid, and certainly we'll hear their views, but I think there's absolutely no point in consulting on such a watered-down proposal as this. We should just leave it as status quo, if that's really all that we can tolerate around the table. I think we've got to look at the economy, we've got to look at the cost of living crisis, we've got to move to a fairer system. No, I realise it won't, there'll be winners and losers, and that's all something we've all got to acknowledge. But we can't run away just because it's going to be a little bit hard. Yes, we'll have some of the losers appealing to us, but we'll also have the winners very happy that we're doing something that we believe is fairer. I ask you colleagues to think about what is fairer. Certainly what is on the table here does not resemble anything close to that.
Councillor Happer.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, councillors. I will be supporting this, and it's for the whole community. That's why I'm supporting it, not just for one segment of the community. I really want this to go out to consultation, and I want us to do it well, and I want the explanations to go out well for the community, so we give good examples of why the hybrid system will do well for the community. I think this is about giving good examples about how we can do it well. Listening to Councillor Naylor, I think the capital system is one way to go, but I also think the hybrid system is one way to go as well. So I also think that that's what we need to do in our consultation process, is explain a system that people haven't heard of before, and that's why we've never done it in our city. And I think we need to have the guts to be able to do it and go out and consult well on it and say, yes, this is a new system, this is what we want to do in our city, and we need to do it and do it well. Yes, 70-30 is a different way of doing it, 70% land and, that's right, land and 30% capital, but it is not as what everybody wants around the table, but I think it's a gradual process, but this is what we want for the next 3 years, and that's what we're proposing. So it's not as much risk, and I think our community hasn't got that risk appetite sometimes, and I think that we've got to respect our community. And I also think that we just have to listen to what our community wants when we go out for consultation, and listen to what they have to say, and that's what consultation will give us. Thank you.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will support this, and the reason I'll support it is just really for one reason. You get many older people in our community have been forced into subdividing their quarter-acre sections. In fact, I was talking to a couple just last week where they had a quarter-acre section and they grew all their vegetables because it offset their income. And they had to have a look at what was a better deal for them, growing their vegetables or going into a house with a smaller section and cutting back on their rates. They're better off on super to be on a small section with a tidy 3-bedroom house than what they were in their house on a full quarter-acre. They made that move just for one reason, to cut back their rates. Their house is quite valuable. Their only income is super. Now, I know a lot of people on super who are paying $130 a fortnight plus out of their super. For us to go anything more than 70-30 is going to hit those people a lot harder than we would plan. I'm very biased, as the Mayor says he's biased towards business, but I'm biased towards older people. And I'm not ashamed of that. But I'm very aware how rates affect people on super. A 70-30 would be acceptable. But if we go to 100%, goodness me, it's going to hurt a lot of people. And I would ask you, councillors, to consider that when you're voting today, that a 70-30 is the fairest way we have at this stage, to do it gently and do it one step at a time. Because if we go to 100%, I think you're going to have an awful lot of people very hurt in this community, not just businesses.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to come into bat for you here, actually. I will be supporting this proposal. Now, look, in an ideal world, my preference would probably be something more along the lines of a 50-50 hybrid than a 70-30, but I accept the reasons that the Mayor's put this forward. So if this were to fail, I wouldn't want the only alternative to be that we go, it's either 30 or it's 100. I think there is a middle ground in there that I'd look at if this fails, but I will be supporting this motion as it stands. There's a couple of reasons for this. Oh, and I apologise, I've just turned off the page to see if I could find the comments from Office. Oh, there was to go, apologies. I'm sorry I'm pausing here. There's a lot of mathematics and a lot of statistics here, and there's a few comments that have been made in the chamber that I really want to question. So the first comment at the start of the debate was, if you support business, this change will help more businesses. And so that's an interesting point. I've had a look at the graph shown on page 140. So the businesses that would have a 25% plus increase in their rates under a capital value system would be 267. The businesses that would have a over 25% decrease in their rates would be 772. And so when we're asking a question of fairness, do we believe that 267 businesses should be paying for an offset to rates for over 770? Is that a fair way of distributing the rates amongst our commercial community? No, it's not, in my opinion. What we would do if we went with the option that's in front of us is 52 businesses would have an over 25% increase, but none would have an over 25% decrease. So we are keeping that, I guess, spread of rate burden a lot tighter under the system that's proposed here today, which I believe is a fairer way of distributing, rather than having massive winners and massive losers. Having some moderate winners and some moderate losers is a fair and much more stomachable way to distribute rates throughout our commercial community, and the same goes for our residential community. I'm a big believer that capital is, well, I am a believer that a capital is fairer, but the advice that officers have given us is that perhaps is a political view, but isn't one that is backed up by the data. And what this report says is that there isn't necessarily a link between capital value and ability to pay. Now, I don't agree with that advice. I think there is a link to a degree between capital value and ability to pay, but do I not agree to that advice to the extent that I think a 100% capital is the fairest system? No, I don't. I'm sorry. I'd like to, but I don't. To the point of, well, this would be quite complicated having a hybrid. Well, we're going off, as our officer says, a base of a very simple system, and so any system that's different to what we're doing now. As our officer said, we've got one of the simplest in the country, so any system's going to be more complicated than that. But what this is proposing is a very simple gear change. So rather than spreading it out over 3 or 4 or 5 years, next year we make a decision, we increase to a 33% capital portion or 30% capital portion, and we make that step 1 year. That's probably the simplest way we can do it. Because as our officers have explained, the complexities of revaluations, of improvement value changes and increased in different developments taking place on a property, make spreading out change over 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or whatever it may be period very difficult to do from a mathematical and fair point of view. And so in this system, the change happens next year, and then we can move and hit the ground running. And if down the track we find that the well, not down the track, if through the submissions and if through the process and if through undertaking that change we find that the community, or we feel the community has an appetite for stomaching more change, then we've got a hybrid system set up that we could look at that down in the future. But but that would be the simplest way that we can undertake this change without getting ourselves into a very complicated mathematical point where we're having to take into account, well, their rates or their land values have gone down through the revaluation, but they've built a new shed out the back, and so that's pushed the other values up. This makes it very simple. The change happens next year, and then we can let it lie, give it a few years, and see what the environment looks like. And just on that last point of Councillor Naylor's on, well, why would we bother doing this? Well, this is 33% fairer. If your view is that capital value is the fairest, why would we bother? Well, this is pushing it to a more fair point. And I think we're trying to strike a balance here, people. I'm not convinced full capital would be fair to the community, but I'm not convinced that just sitting at land value is also the best way of doing it. So why bother? Well, this would be 30% better than it is now, if you want to look at it that way. So, look, I will support this, and I hope it passes, but if it wasn't to pass, I'd be more than comfortable moving a 50-50 rather than the only alternative being full capital.
Councillor, oh, sorry. Can you come back in?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and colleagues. Been interesting debate to listen to so far. I find it actually quite peculiar that we're really coming right back to square one, given that 2 years ago we did have an in-principle decision to transition to capital value and had those debates then around fairness, reasonableness, et cetera. But regardless, we are here now asking those same questions and looking to answer them. What resonates most for me in this space is that what is fair and affordable is a strong relationship between people's or businesses' ability to pay and what we're asking them to pay. So those that have a bit more contribute a bit more, and those that have a bit less contribute a bit less. To me, that's fair, simple, and the easiest way to put a proposition to the community. And we know that that relationship is stronger under a capital value system than land value. And so that, to me, is the clear and compelling case for change. That's what it was in 2021 and still true today. Now, as you know, Councillor Wood, Councillor Finlay, the Mayor even has outlined, you know, no system is perfect. There's some strengths and weaknesses of each system, but on balance, my preference sits with CV as the better option. I'd urge you not to buy into some of the kind of fear-mongering comments that have come out so far. Most councils, so Productivity Commission analysis, 70% of councils in New Zealand have moved to capital value. Their economies haven't imploded. They haven't had to depopulate. Elderly people still live in those communities. That transition is possible, not only possible, it is by far and away the most common approach taken in New Zealand. And that is because you do have a fairer system under CV, but it's also simpler and more easily understood, as others have explained. So I think those are all good reasons for us to, over time, in a progressive way, transition to capital value, rather than get mixed up in some sort of hybrid halfway house. When there is a better system, you go there. You don't stop halfway. You finish the job. So please, to those councillors that are considering hybrid, put your support behind capital value. It is the best for the whole community. Most communities in New Zealand have already made that move, and it's what we should be offering to this community now so that we have a fair basis for the community. Thank you.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to actually voice my opinion on the matter. Surely it's been long in the making, and I know Councillor Johnson has been a strong advocate for this over the past few years, and I'm sure there'll be also a lot of community members who have a lot of interest in this, because I've been actually receiving some emails from people about this particular topic. Now, I rise to actually support this. Happy to support this recommendation. I've heard a lot of words being thrown around: fair, affordable, very subjective. And what's fair to someone or affordable to someone might not be the same for another person. While I do believe that there's a case for change, and that land value system can be unfair, I also note that, as we've seen also in the report and some independent reading that some of us might be doing, that both systems actually have strengths and weaknesses. So none have the monopoly over the other. They both have strengths and weaknesses. And this is also reflected in a number of councils around the country who have actually opted to move from capital value to land value, or move from land value to capital value. And we are seeing a number of councils actually in the country right now. Wellington is one of them at the moment. We've seen Orowhenua going through their rating systems or rating reviews. MDC, just across our neighbour, have wanted to move from capital to land value. So we're seeing all these changes happening across New Zealand. And that's simply because they can't seem to find the middle ground. And I believe having a hybrid model actually gets us to that point where we can actually meet in the middle and make it a bit fairer, so we can use both systems at the same time. So for the purpose of this, I'll be supporting a hybrid model, although I would have preferred probably a 50-50 split or 40-50 split to make a significant change or material change to the recommendation before us. I'm comfortable with this. And when talking about rates review, there are always going to be winners and losers, whether we like it or not. And this is ongoing. This is actually a proposal going out to the community for public consultation. A decision is not being made here. We're just presenting the community with a bunch of recommendations or preferred options. Consultation to tease out the feedback from the community, to tease out what the community is actually thinking about what we're trying to do here. And then during the long-term process, which is actually the time that we actually make this decision, we can consider those feedback and listen to the community. So for that purpose, I will be supporting this, and we'll actually be going for a hybrid model. And should that fail, I'll probably be supporting Councillor Wood's recommendation for a 50-50 split. If we want to make Palmerston North a better place to live, a more attractive place for businesses to actually relocate in Palmerston North, this is one of the things to do, in my personal opinion. We'll make it cheaper for businesses to establish themselves here, to attract businesses, to attract work, to make Palmerston more affordable. I've also met a lot of young people, a lot of people of my age in the 30s who actually want to settle in Palmerston North. Why? Because they believe that life is affordable here in Palmerston North, and the Palmerston is a great place to settle, to raise a family, to build a house, or to rent, and that sort of thing. So making our rates system more affordable is one way to attract people to Palmerston North, to attract Palmerston North. So I'll be supporting this recommendation. I would encourage those that are sitting on the capital side or full capital to actually reconsider the decision, because both systems, whether we like it or not, have got advantages and disadvantages, and we need to meet in the middle, and I believe having a hybrid model is the way to go. Thank you.
Councillor Zabellan.
Ngā mihi, Mr Mayor. Thank you. I just have a little bit of giggle of this down the track talk, or considering how long it's taken us to get down the track to this point, and also that in the 2 years since we've been working towards this point, towards a CV sort of debate, we don't even have all of the modelling in the paper because the officer ran out of time. So I'm hearing a lot of rhetoric, not a huge amount of evidence, but I am in agreement with Councillor Johnson and Councillor Naylor that we are looking for a greater, fairer spread, not the least change, and I do accept that fairness is subjective, which is why I think the consultation process is so important. But if we go out to our community with a decent change, an actual change, they will tell us what they think, and business/economy, if we're conflating those into a single thing, will have the same chance as everyone else to weigh in on this, and maybe a few extras if they get you guys on the phone. The biggest thing, the biggest impact on rates affordability is how much we spend. So before we, start going, this way is more expensive, this way is more expensive, it's all proportionality, and the envelope is what will have the biggest impact on the city. That's what has the most chance of bankrupting the city, not proportionality. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, colleagues, for your comments. I think I'm probably about to delve into rhetoric rather than evidence. But I think that is where we're at today in setting up this debate to take out to our community. I'm a little disappointed, to be honest, Mr Mayor, with the 70-30 proposal. A little disappointed, colleagues, that we're excited for something that's a bit fairer. Is that really the extent of our aspiration? A bit fairer? It's not the extent of my aspiration, for sure. I don't think it's an accepting that fairness is subjective. But to me, fairness, the fairness discussion here isn't about restricting the amount of change to the lowest possible amount, because that assumes that the system we have now is fair. And I have some real questions about that. We're not starting from a position that is fair and equitable. I think we all heard that, or I certainly clearly heard it in the feedback following the budget that was post the re-evaluation process. People do not think that our system is currently fair. So to go into a proposal trying to maintain status quo or as close to it as humanly possible does not seem to me to be a sensible response to the questions that were put to us following those revaluations. I do take the view that CV is a closer proxy to ability to pay. And that's the approach I'm taking to what is fair in this situation. It's fair to link ability to pay with the amount we ask people to contribute. And for me, capital valuation gets us to that over time in a measured way. And that's the approach I would like to hear from our community about. Accepting that whatever we go out with, they can tell us what they think. But I think to go out with the biggest change and explain that gives us better quality information coming back in to our decision-making process, where hopefully we can move away from rhetoric and towards evidence. Thank you.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it is timely that we actually go out and engage with our community. There were points in those earlier terms that Councillor Johnson and I were kind of she was pushing for it, and I was going, no, I just don't see the community looking for this as the next hot issue. But now I actually think this is an issue that we should be engaging with our community, partly around the revaluation, which engendered a lot of anomalies and unfairness in the way that was spread. And that created a lot of public interest and feedback, and I could actually be quite sympathetic with those outcomes in many cases. The timing, Councillor Zebba-Bellin mentioned about waiting and getting a report that's probably not so directive in either way, and this has been an issue that has been before us, and I guess a frustration once we decided to move forward with it. I wish we would have got this before us. It would have been fairer to kind of deal with it earlier. But can't turn back the clock. My view up until more recently has been the 50-50 split of using the best of both options and the worst of both options, because I personally don't see them being a suitable option. There's no silver bullet. The term fairness gets thrown around. It is subjective, and it has different effects on different parties in our community. When I'm weighing up on which way to move on this, it's about bringing the community along with us. And that's why I'm more weighted towards the hybrid option before us. I take the point that it's not taken us all the way and getting the heightened or the higher level of engagement. But what I suspect will happen is that there'll be lots of weights both to and fro, and will be quite divisive, would be my experiences considering this issue in the past, and in the end there's been no change. And so going with a step out, we can still engage the community on that wider option and variations along the way, but I feel like we're still going to get quite strong feedback on this issue, notwithstanding we're going out with a proposed rate rise that's been higher than any other year we've done in more recent terms. That's going to engender feedback anyway. So I think we're going to have quite a strong consultative process. So it comes back to this notion of the church organist that went away on mission trip for a year and come back for the Christmas carols, and noticed that the church organ was moved from one side of the stage to the other and going to the organist that had been playing all year. How did you manage that? Because when I went to move it, I moved it one week, and all the people in the congregation go, "Oh, you can't move the organ, it's going to be, oh no." So we just moved it back again to save the headache and got no change. She said, "How did you manage to move it?" And she said, "I moved it 1 inch every week, and everyone kind of just come along on the journey." And I kind of use that hypothetical story or little fable to say, I think we need to bring the community along with us to make steps in that direction without trying to get the change response that will hold us back even making the first move. So that's the kind of notion around bringing the community along with us where I'll cast my vote today. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for taking me out of the queue earlier on. I've got a question, actually. And the question is that the way the motions are actually set at the moment, does that restrict us in terms of, the Chief Executive mentioned earlier about in the consultation, there would actually be 3 parts, no change, capital value or hybrid. With the motions as they are currently, does that restrict us in terms of how we can consult? Thank you.
Through the chair, when the consultation comes back for approval, these are the sorts of things that you'd be wanting to go out with at least 3 options. What you're doing here is establishing your preferred option.
Thank you, Wade. I won't support this, and I think the points have been made quite clearly, is that if you're actually going to change your rating system, you actually need to indicate with some willingness that you are willing to actually look at a totally different system. As the Chief Executive has just outlined, is that if we went out and said, right, we want to consult on capital value, then there will be other options that will lie under that. The reality is that whatever system that you actually have, there are going to be some people who are going to be hard done by, right? The way to actually stimulate some response from the community is to make sure that you go out with a very strong consultation stance, and that will actually then invigorate some response from the community, and we will actually then start to actually understand the implications of what it is that we're actually proposing. So I would suggest that the 70-30 hybrid as being our main positioning, I think is very weak. It won't stimulate a response from the community. Yeah, as I mentioned, I think that probably a full consultation on capital value with the other components sitting underneath that will actually get us the response that we need to be able to make an informed and appropriate decision for our rating system. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You finished early. Sorry. Well done. And others have just jumped out of the queue. So nobody else wants to speak? Okay. Look, thank you, colleagues, appreciate all your comments. And look, let's be honest, it's not a perfect world. I just want to agree to disagree with a couple of comments. And there was like a comment that we're just going to capital. We made that decision, we're just going to do capital. We agreed that we were going to look at capital and what the effects of that were. So I certainly didn't sign up to a massive change. I was certainly happy to have a good look at things, and I believe this is the best way of doing it. I admit I'm probably in the church organist category of moving things along, rather than the rock star that's going to just absolutely hurt everybody. Just on terms of the Productivity Commission report, I actually received that along with other Metro mayors, and actually when you read the detail, it's very much around one system was not backed over the other, and you can go back and read that line for line if you want to. So, Councillor, I encourage you to do that, because actually one wasn't backed over the other. The word fair has been used a lot, and yes, we can be brave in this chamber, but has anybody actually gone out and spoken to any businesses? Because you've all talked about it. I have. And it ain't good news. So for those that think this is great for business, I think you might have to have a second opinion on that. Look, I'm aware some of you are really keen to move to straight capital, but we will cripple parts of the ecosystem of our city if we do that. It's not a fear-mongering, it's a fact. There will be some there that will be paying hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars more if you go to that. In fact, yeah, it's quite crippling actually, to be fair. So the hybrid is not status quo, and it gets us moving along on that pathway. The officers said some businesses will get some reductions, not all. So again, just want to push back on that. And for those that are joined the city a bit later in time, we haven't had a problem with the way we've rated for decades. It's just the revaluations that have made things more difficult in more recent times, and hence the need to have a look at what we're doing. So I'm very happy to move this. I ask for your support. This is getting us on the journey. We'll have other options there of full and whatever the other ones will be. And I'm sure our community will tell us what they think. So if I could ask you to vote, please. And that is passed, 10 votes for and 6 against. Okay, we've got an additional one to come up. We'll just get up and okay, Councillor Naylor, I'll get you to speak to it while it's coming up.
Thank you. Given the vote on this item and given the advice from the Chief Executive that it would make sense to consult the community on a few options, I'm wanting to move a recommendation that moving to a full capital value rate system is consulted on as a option B, obviously alongside the council's preferred option, which has just been voted on. That gives the community access to being able to see what both options would look like, and I think that we would be better informed when we come to making a decision next year, and I think we're also in a better position not to run the risk of having to reconsult if in fact we didn't want to proceed with what is now the preferred option.
Thank you, Councillor. And that's seconded by Councillor Johnson. Councillor Harper.
Just a question for the CE. Would that be difficult for you to do that?
Through the chair, no.
Thank you, very briefly.
Just perhaps through the chair, what I'd also suggest though is that we potentially bring in some options back to you. This would have been one of them anyway, for you to go out and consult with. And you know, status quo may also be an option as well. So just suggesting that you've specifically mentioned this one, but look, we'll bring back the other parts for you to discuss at that point in time.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a point of clarification, just on what the CS mentioned around, because my understanding was that once this goes up for consultation, that we have all the options, our preferred option, and then all the other options as well lined up for the community to sort of consider. Isn't the case?
Yes, through the chair. So the one that you've just resolved will be the preferred option that would go out. And so we'd clearly highlight that. This would be another option that would be alongside it, but there may be one or two others as well. We'll bring back for you to sign off before the consultation document goes out.
Councillor, I'm happy to support it. I mean, it actually is in the recommendation when you read the detail. So it was going to happen anyway, but it makes it crystal clear for everybody. So happy to support it. No other question. No other comments. Do you need a right to reply? No. Okay. We'll vote, please. That's passed, 16 votes for and none against. All right. We might break for lunch. So we'll see you back in the chamber in an hour. 20. Oh, sorry. We've actually got lunch here for you. So, we will have to be an hour for everybody else in staffing. So we'll be back in the chamber at 1:25.